So thank you for joining us. As I just said, this meeting will be recorded. Please update your name on Zoom to include your preferred name and your pronouns. Your microphones are turned off to start, and you will need to unmute in order to speak. If you're joining via phone, the way to unmute is to press *6. You can also use nonverbal feedback options like raising your hand or leaving a message in the chat box if you have any questions. If you're called into the meeting in order to raise your hand to ask a question or something else, you use *9. My name is Daniela Sanchez Zamora. Forgot to put my second last name there. It's okay. I work in the transportation department for the active transportation team. And with me today is Jeff Alexis.
Hello, everyone. Jeffrey Alexis with the City of Boston Public Works Engineering Division, and currently working as the project manager for the Cummins Highway project. From there, I will send it off to Jared.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself. I'm Jared Staley. I am the neighborhood planner at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. I am also helping lead the Plan Mattapan initiative along with my colleague Muge.
Hi everyone, I'm Muge. I'm the interim assistant deputy director for downtown and neighborhood planning at the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and I, like Jared said, co-lead Plan Mattapan, and I'll pass it off to Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Devine. I'm a transportation planner at the BPDA. I also work on the Plan Mattapan team. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. But before we start the meeting, I just wanted to mention and acknowledge that there's also another meeting that the city planned for today. So ISD is hosting a meeting about unsanctioned backyard events. I will drop the link in a second. This meeting will be recorded. So if you feel like that is an important meeting for you to attend, please go. And then we will make sure to send you a link to this recording. That said, I just wanted to briefly go over sort of what we are here today. This will be a brief meeting. I just wanted to reiterate, like, the reconstruction is happening. One of the questions we get asked fairly often is how do we collaborate and sort of how do these double meetings tend to happen, and sort of the work that we do together and collaboration we do together. So we wanted to highlight the work that that Plan Mattapan is doing, and also learn a little bit more about how their plan is going and how we collaborate together, and then review the planning guidances that inform our work and the reconstruction of Cummins, and then just give you some updates on resources available in Mattapan and upcoming events. So hopefully from this, we learn sort of the work of Plan Mattapan and how their work relates to transportation planning. And as I mentioned, how we work together and how they work with us on not only developing their plans, but also making them a reality. And then how does decision-making around land use impact transportation and mobility? And then for learning about the Cummins Highway reconstruction projects, I want to give an overview, sort of the guiding principles and goals that we are working to achieve in this project, and how your input is utilized through the design process. And what else we use as input for the design, and upcoming opportunities to provide sort of more design specific inputs.
All right, good evening, everyone. To jump into a brief summary of the Cummins Highway project, reconstruction project, just wanted to let everybody know what you're seeing right now on Cummins Highway is a temporary redesign of slow speeding drivers and to improve safety for all users while we work on the design for the reconstruction project. As right now, you're also seeing National Grid out there. I know that they've kind of made the road look a bit rough, and it kind of caused like a few traffic issues. But what they're actually doing out there is they're currently making much needed repairs to the gas mains along Cummins Highway before we come in and reconstruct it. Um, we're still collecting traffic data on the pilot, and we actually have some data collection planned for this fall. And if you would like any more information on safety data and comments that we've collecting since the pilot, please visit boston.gov /Cummins Highway. So one of the questions that we've heard recently in response to the pilot is why the city reconstructing Cummins Highway. To give you some background info, Cummins Highway has not been updated since the spring of 1955. At that time, streetcars ran along Cummins Highway and were moved in 1953 to make room for more cars. So what we're seeing with the street layout reflects is the priorities of the 1950s, which just essentially enabled non-residents to drive quickly through our neighborhoods. So reconstructing Cummins Highway, Public Works, along with the Boston Transportation Department, plan to completely rebuild the street. That includes reconstructing the sidewalks, putting in a new curb, a resetting curb, installing new streetlights along the corridor, traffic signals. We are planning on repaving the road and replace or update any utilities as necessary. The city currently has this project budgeted at $12 million to reconstruct Cummins Highway from River Street down to the Wood Avenue and Harvest Street intersection. But we are also looking at hopefully making improvements to the section between Wood Avenue and American Legion Highway as well. That's still in the works, but that's something that we're looking at because that's also a request that we've gotten from the community. So before moving forward, we wanted your input. We cannot produce a design without your input. You will help shape how Cummins Highway should be for the next 70 years. As Daniela mentioned, we are going to be reconstructing Cummins Highway. I mean, how it looks for the next 70 years is the process that we're going through right now. Currently, we're doing community outreach to inform the final design, but we have not begun engineering work to design the corridor. We're still strictly working on engagement. So the goals we're working to achieve as part of this project, essentially would be to advance the goals outlined in the Go Boston 2030 initiative. We're looking at improving safety on our streets, reducing emissions, and investing in communities to achieve equity and access to opportunities. In doing so, we've also partnered with other city departments to advance our collective plans. We're working on informing residents of the work that's happening around the city of Boston, and we're trying to improve collaboration in our work and achieve neighborhood and citywide goals. Lastly, we're trying to collaborate with residents and advance your goals. This project, this neighborhood is yours. We're trying to work with you to build awareness and participation in the efforts that you care about, and also confirm your vision for the future of our projects. So one of the major departments that we've actually been working with is the Boston Planning and Development Agency, the BPDA, which is the Planning and Economic Development Agency for the city of Boston. The BPDA works with people and communities across all neighborhoods of Boston to plan and build for the future of the city. The planning department specifically works with the community to create long-term visions for places. The BPDA collaborates with many departments, including the Public Works Department and the Transportation Department. We work together to review developments that impact the road network and plans to make sure that each street project is addressing community values and goals.
So I'm happy to discuss a little bit more about what we're doing at the BPDA, specifically in Mattapan and through the Plan Mattapan process. Many of you will have recognized me or someone on this call or just the name Plan Mattapan. Plan Mattapan is a neighborhood-wide planning initiative that works closely with the community to review past planning efforts and identify needs and opportunities for improvements, which will support the long-term equitable growth and sustainability of the neighborhood. The Plan Mattapan initiative began in October of 2018, and we are starting to wrap up things. We're not quite there yet, but we've been around working with the community over the last 3 years, discussing the vision that you all have for your neighborhood, and we in turn have been working to realize that vision. The vision statement that we collectively worked on and came up with is Plan Mattapan will strengthen the existing culture and stability of the community by supporting affordable housing, creating opportunities for businesses to thrive, and enhancing connections to improve the neighborhood's experience, accessing jobs and spaces where people gather. For the purposes of today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on this last piece here, enhancing connections to improve the neighborhood's experience, accessing jobs and spaces where people gather. So mobility is a core part of the work that we're doing in Plan Mattapan. Next slide. What is Plan Mattapan and what do we study? So everything that you see in the dashed blue line there is our study area. The orange line is the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Zoning District. So some of the outcomes of this planning initiative would, foresee changing the zoning code. And that would be that area in yellow. But the majority of our time has been spent focusing on that area in the dashed blue. As a part of Plan Mattapan, we study housing, economic development, climate change, the environment, and of course, mobility. We do this through understanding existing conditions as well as community values and goals. And this is done through community conversations, whether that be a chat with the planner, popsicles with the planner, meetings such as this, or simply just engaging regularly throughout the year. We have a community engagement manager, Kenya Beeman, who does a lot of that work for us as well. We then plan for the future of both the neighborhood and the city, linking values and goals of the neighborhood to new policies, guidelines, and ultimately the implementation of the plan at a citywide level. Go ahead to the next slide. So who participates in Plan Mattapan or any of our planning initiatives? First and foremost, you, the community, is involved in all of our planning initiatives. We make sure that we are advertising, we're out in your neighborhood, you are familiar with our faces, and we really want to make sure that every voice in the Mattapan community is heard through this process and all of our processes. We also collaborate with City of Boston departments, including BTD, Public Works, D&D, the Office of Economic Development, the Environment Department, and Parks as well. We do these coordinations through regular meetings with Boston Transportation Department and Public Works Department. We meet on a bi-weekly basis to talk about our ongoing work, what meetings we have coming up, what issues that we may need to resolve. Maybe there was a conversation that one of us respectively had in the community, and we just want to discuss that further and make sure that we are working in tandem to realize both of our department's goals. We also work with the state of Massachusetts or the Commonwealth. So we work with MassDOT or the Department of Transportation with the Commonwealth. We work with the T, and we also work with DCR. So this is not just the BPDA or any one person sitting in a room and kind of coming up with the vision for Mattapan. There are a lot of people involved. There's a lot of voices. And most importantly, we want to make sure that we hear yours. Next slide. So some of those goals that we've come up with over the last 3 years, and they're ever evolving. So these aren't quite, what you'll see later this year. But under housing, we really want to encourage affordable, stable, and diverse housing options in Mattapan to reduce displacement and maintain home ownership levels. Mattapan has one of the highest rates of home ownership in the city. Under people and places, we want to guide new projects to contribute to strengthening the existing culture and celebrating Mattapan's identity. Mattapan has a very rich history, and we don't want that to be ignored just because you see new development or new projects coming into the neighborhood. Under environment and climate change, we really want to improve quality of life by promoting healthy environments and preparing for climate change. This includes community resilience, so making sure you know who your neighbors are. It's about creating a walkable environment, reducing heat island effect, and improving air quality. Jobs and businesses. We want to drive inclusive economic growth through support for local economies and increase access to opportunities within and external to Mattapan. This includes getting folks to major job centers, whether that be in Boston, out of Boston, or job centers that are in Mattapan. We also want to support the local industries in Mattapan itself. We want to see restaurants, artists, retailers, etc., thrive in Mattapan. And last but not least, and certainly important for tonight, mobility. We want to see an increase in access to high quality travel options so that people can safely and reliably connect to destinations within Mattapan and the rest of the city. This can be done in a variety of ways. Maybe you're walking to Mattapan Square or to Morton Street. Maybe you're taking your bike to the Neponset River Greenway to connect to Hyde Park in the future, or to Dorchester. It could also be hopping on the T and getting to downtown. And of course, cars are a part of our mobility system as well. Next slide. So that's a brief overview of Plan Mattapan. I'm going to have my colleague Muggsy get into a little bit deeper about the goals specific to mobility.
Thanks, Jared. Hard act to follow, mostly because that was beautifully summarized. But thanks for having us all here tonight. Thanks for coming. So just to jump in a little bit more, we've had a lot of conversations about mobility through Plan Mattapan, but just in general, I think, the goals are summarized here, but they come a lot, not just from the city's planning initiative, which was Go Boston 2030, which is, something we build upon in our planning initiatives as well. But in previous conversations we've had with the community, and a lot of things that came up were around safety. How do you cross, crossing Blue Hill Avenue is not fun. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I've seen a lot of people do it differently. So it's a lot of, zigzagging here and there. So something to keep in mind. And then other things we've heard a lot about is just, people wanting to go to different destinations. So walking to Mattapan Square isn't something that a lot of people do. A lot of people use their cars to get to a lot of different destinations. But a lot of people were saying in surveys that we put out that, if we had other opportunities and other ways to get to certain places, then we would use those opportunities. So through our Plan Mattapan and through our coordination with the Boston Transportation Department and Public Works Department, we're really trying to find opportunities to make that happen. Next slide, please. So one of the things we heard a lot about, obviously, and as part of our goals, is around community. So how can we use land use? So the things that we work on, meaning the types of things you see in your environment and in your neighborhood, and combine that with mobility and transportation to actually enhance how our community works with each other, interacts with each other, and stuff like that. So one of the ways in which we address that is through this idea of nodes. So really what a node is similar to like what Mattapan Square is. It's a place where you see commercial, housing, retail. You see a bunch of different uses all in one place. And what that does is it promotes people. You might hear my child screaming in the background. I apologize in advance. He is in the bath. I will now regress. So one of the things that we see here is that, people like to go to these places to meet their friends, to, access all these different goods and services. But one of the things is that it doesn't exist all around Mattapan. We see it in the square. But if we decentralize that, if we actually look at these different opportunities for nodes throughout the neighborhood, you're actually creating opportunities for more people to meet in different places, also to get there in different ways. One of the things that we heard a lot about from the communities that they drive either out of the neighborhood to go to find things that they want to have access to JP, to, Dorchester, et cetera, or they go to Mattapan Square, they drive, they stop, they get something, and then they leave. And so one of the things that Plan Mattapan tries to emphasize is that we want to create more opportunities for people to stop, to people to walk to their destinations and get to places that they want to go to. Next slide, please. So another big thing, and we just mentioned this before, is around safety and access. So what you'll notice, and one of the things that we've learned from our studying of transportation in Mattapan, is that you have to get on one of the major corridors in order to get anywhere. And so one of the things that we're trying to do through Plan Mattapan is create more opportunities and access to green spaces, to open space, to parks, to community amenities, and find new opportunities to get there. So through things like looking at Blue Hill Avenue and looking at Cummins Highway, we can actually find and create more safer ways for people to walk through their neighborhood to get to these destinations. We've heard many times that people don't feel safe biking on Cummins Highway. People don't feel safe necessarily or comfortable walking. I mean, it's not a very comfortable environment when cars and, trucks, et cetera, are speeding past. And so we're really trying to find opportunities to make it so it is a more walkable and more safe and accessible place that people can use. Next slide, please. And then healthy environments. So a healthy environment is, I think, one of the most important things that we've heard through this process, especially around, not just around climate change, but also around just how we move through space, how we experience our neighborhoods. Health of the environment, so the health of the community and the environment are linked. So if streets and buildings, all these things impact and public realm impact health. So the way, if there are more cars, if there's more congestion, if there's more traffic, that affects air quality, which then impacts residents. And I think if you've attended previous presentations, I think in July, there was a lot of conversation around climate change and also air quality, and how this design of streets and of sidewalks are really important to how residents experience a place. So not only does street trees and also creating opportunities for different modes of transit impact the health and safety of the community, but it also impacts the health and safety of the environment. And so those things are very closely tied together. And I think, we should emphasize that throughout all these different processes. So here you just see a map that was produced of all the different open spaces and people who have access to those open spaces. So when you see the grayer areas, those are underserved to open space. So if we can either create more open spaces and public open spaces, then we create more access, or we have to create better modes of getting to those places. Next slide, please. So how does this impact the redesign of Cummins Highway? Like, how does anything I just talked about really actually interact with Cummins Highway? And it does, because everything that we talk about through Plan Mattapan, be it about housing, mobility, the environment, climate, jobs and businesses, all of these things actually are translated and reinterpreted and shared with our sister agencies. So with BTD, with Public Works, and all of the others, the Department of Neighborhood Development, et cetera. So the Cummins Highway redesign is actually just another opportunity to implement these values. We're benefiting from the fact that this is happening at the same time, because we're able to translate the values and goals we've heard through our process to Public Works and BTD's process. So that's just something we'd like, for people to keep in mind. Like, I'm very excited to see what comes of this, and I hope that the values and goals of the community plus the values and goals that are expressed in Plan Mattapan all make it and are kind of come to fruition through this process as well. Next slide, please. So to just close out our section a little bit, we have done a lot of planning workshops in the past. As Jared said, we kicked off in 2018 in October. Right now, we're really working on taking everything we've heard and translating that into how do we actually get to the place we want to be? So how do we actually get to see these things come to fruition? We rely on our agencies, on the agencies within the city and departments within the city to implement the majority of our planning initiative. So the Boston Planning and Development Agency can can impact zoning, but a lot of what we hear also has to be implemented by the Boston Transportation Department, by Public Works Department, by the Department of Neighborhood Development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anything that comes to us is really, we play the facilitator in actually translating some of these things to happen in the future. So that's what we're working on currently coordinating, and we'll be sharing those out likely starting in the next few months. So be on the lookout for that. I know that's towards the end of this presentation, but I did want to transition. I think Daniela will be presenting now on a little bit more on Cummins and our relationship with their work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as Moxie and Jared mentioned, we meet very often to talk about sort of how their plan is going and sort of the input that they're getting. And if it's related to Cummins, we take that input and sort of look at what's possible. But one of the things that hasn't happened with that plan is sort of the realization of that plan yet, right? We're not in a stage of which making that plan happen yet, because the final recommendations are not out yet. But there are other plans that we do follow because they've passed through a community process and they've been pretty intense. And so these plans sort of guide the work that we do and on Cummins and also on other streets in our city. So one of those is the Fairmont Indigo Planning Initiative. And through this study, which is related to the Fairmont line, and if you're not familiar, although many of you are, there's a Blue Hill Avenue transit stop there for the Fairmont line, which is in between Blue Hill Avenue and Cummins. And this study is sort of corridor wide, and it looks at different stops. And it looks at what commercial and residential opportunities are there for development, transit improvements for transit access, public realm, and community building initiatives. And so it details for each stop and for each community, but also it has specific recommendations for Cummins Highway, which included improving the pedestrian connections to this rail line between Mattapan Square and the station entry, improving pedestrian safety, like improving the sidewalk width and reducing the curb cuts and improving the crossings that exist already, reducing the roadway width, or at least visually, creating sort of like a slower street, and improving bicycle connections and safety for pedestrians as well. And then mentioned previously, and also by Jeff, but also by Maxie and Jared, one of the other big plans that underwent in 2018, and that was released and that we follow, is the city's comprehensive transportation plan, which is Go Boston 2030. And in there you will find all of our goals and targets, which passed through a community process and were built together. And so they include sort of like the vision of the city for the next, yes, until 20, I don't know, I can't number anymore, 9 years. And it also has specific recommendations for Cummins, in which it's mentioned as a neighborhood connector and corridor, and in need of enhancements to improve the travel safety, accommodate people biking, and make walking more comfortable. It's also highlighted as sort of a key connector and a possibility for connecting Franklin Park and the Southwest Corridor to the Neponset Greenway, and sort of allowing like a through access of green space. And yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Hello again, everyone. So to emphasize and kind of reiterate the major goals of the reconstruction of Cummins Highway, it's to make the roadway safer and more accessible. The city, as well as the residents that we spoke to from the neighborhood, we want to transform Cummins Highway into a tree-lined neighborhood street that is safer for families to walk, wait for the bus, ride bikes, or as well as travel by vehicle. We like Cummins Highway to connect residents to the city's network of open spaces and ultimately make it easier for elders as well as young children across the street. So to give you a quick timeline of the Cummins Highway Reconstruction Project, our first 3 community meetings were held at the Mannahunt Community Center on Hebron Street in April of 2019, October of 2019, and a third one in February of 2020. In those 3 meetings, we kind of combed through a number of concept designs for the Cummins Highway reconstruction, and ultimately settled on a preferred option that reduced the number of travel lanes along the roadway, which is why we implemented the design trial phase 1 in July of 2020, and then improved on that, removed the white and orange barriers to provide pavement markings and flex posts, which is what you're currently seeing right now as part of the phase 2. In that time, we've also had attended a number of neighborhood association meetings, as well as had a couple of pop-ups at the Mattapan Farmers Market on Fairway Street. But the community engagement is ongoing for this project. We have had a number of engagement opportunities in June and July, where we had a special talk with to discuss arrested mobility with Mattapan Food and Fitness with Charles Brown. We've looked at heat resiliency, and we talked about air quality along the corridor as well. In August, we're talking about land use in this meeting, of course. But we also have a number of engagement opportunities lined up. In September, we want to talk about lighting. And in October, we want to talk about public health. And in November, we want to talk about, and beyond, we want to talk about green infrastructure, trees, the roundabouts, and other pedestrian improvements that we're proposing as part of this project. I just want to note that we do keep recordings of these meetings on our webpage. We definitely want you, if you missed them, please look into them. You kind of see what we have planned, and I mean, if you want to reach out for discussions, to talk to us, we're available, because as I mentioned, like, your input is very important. So before we kind of move forward with the design of the Cummins Highway reconstruction, we want to continue having that engagement process going. So the input that we've been using to inform the reconstruction of Cummins Highway ultimately is the data collection and analysis. Our engineers collect traffic volumes and model the traffic flow. That we've conducted a number of observations and evaluate available crash data along Cummins Highway. More information about this data that we are collecting is available on the boston.gov /Cummins-Highway. Oh, hold on. So I'm getting a phone call. Sorry about that. # safety -on -Cummins-Highway. If you caught that. Yes. So the second, and I would say a very important aspect of informing the Cummins Highway reconstruction is community input. Community input we receive is used to inform our understanding of the corridor and create the final design for the reconstruction. When you provide input with an issue or idea, we go out to the corridor, we observe, we collect data, and we research what we can do in design to address your needs, while also balancing the needs of others and the goals for the project. Next slide, please. And lastly, we want to follow best practices. We follow our design guidelines endorsed by the city, the state, or other federal agencies. And as I've mentioned, we consult with peers around the country for the best practices and engineering practices to address a lot of the concerns that residents have expressed, whether it's the speeding, whether it's the traffic congestion, whether residents don't feel safe walking or biking along the corridor. These are all the things that we address during our design process. So we will continue to have conversations with you about the redesign of Cummins Highway. Your input during these discussions will be used to inform the design of Cummins, and will be shared with other departments to inform their work as well. In June, we hosted a special tea talk with Charles T. Brown to discuss the ways mobility of Black Americans is limited in the U.S. through police policies and politely. And in July, we hosted 2 virtual meetings with the Environment Department. Next slide, please. To kind of summarize what we've heard from those meetings, at this city's heat resilience study on the redesign on Cummins Highway, we heard that residents want us to add more shade along Cummins Highway. They wanted us to plant trees and look at installing bus shelters along the corridor. You're also concerned about the temporary design and impact on emergency services and traffic, as well as trash trucks. When we talked about air quality, what we've heard from the community is that you were interested in monitoring air quality along the corridor. We're also looking at locations where air qualities can be located in the project area. And as I've mentioned, residents were concerned about the temporary redesign on Cummins Highway and how the traffic might also be reflecting the air quality along the corridor. So lastly, next steps, stay tuned for the workshops that we're planning on hosting to discuss the design elements on Cummins Highway. We have a street lighting and Cummins Highway redesign meeting scheduled for September 21st. And then we hope to look forward to planning a green infrastructure meeting. We plan on looking at the trees along Cummins Highway and where potential locations could be for trees and green infrastructure. And also we plan on looking at the roundabout and the Cummins Highway design. So all of those dates are to be determined. And as I mentioned, from what we've been doing previously, we'll be announcing them and sending out flyers and mailers, as well as through social media. So please look out for those in the upcoming weeks and months. With that, I will I will pass it over to Daniela to discuss the resources and staying engaged.
Yeah. Thank you. Jared, do you want to briefly mention what's coming up for the project?
Yes. So even though, well, we're working towards finishing the planning document and the plan management process. So sometime in September, although it won't be the 21st of September, because all y'all are going to be at the Cummins Highway meeting on the 21st of September. We will be having a corridors and residential fabric workshop. If you remember way back when we had one of these to discuss height and density, this will be a follow-up to that with some information about some scenario development and how that could impact zoning. And while we're working really hard to wrap up the plan, come up with our final recommendations and work with other city departments, we're not waiting until the end of the plan in order to do some of our implementation. So we have some ongoing temporary public art activation happening in the neighborhood. Some of you have been aware of that. You should be seeing a mural going up at the corner of Regis Road and Blue Hill Avenue. And then the BPDA is also working and coordinating with MAPC on the Neponset Greenway extension work. There's actually a lot of people who are involved in the Neponset Greenway extension. The BPDA and the Mattapan team specifically is working with the MAPC to find the gaps between those various projects and really work to make sure that we are filling those gaps and creating a continuous Greenway extension to Hyde Park. For any other updates, feel free to check us out on our website at bit.ly/plan Mattapan, or you can connect with Kenya Beeman, who is our community engagement manager and Mattapan resident, and her email address is there as well. And then Daniela for Cummins Highway.
Yeah, so as Jeff mentioned, our next meeting, we're super excited. We'll be talking to the team that does all the lighting in the city. And we'll also be looking at sort of the opportunities for improving lighting along the Cummins Highway stretch for the reconstruction. We've heard a lot about lighting specifically and sort of the challenges of walking, but even visibility for driving. So we look forward to sort of having conversations about how we can improve that for the final reconstruction. If you want more information, just sort of what we've been up to, the recordings for these previous meetings, to review the presentation, you will also find information about the safety data, the safety improvements that we've been doing, or the data that we've been gathering, the comments that we've received. All of that information is on our website, which is boston.gov/Cummins-Highway. And then we host every other Wednesday, we host a chat with us, or chat with a project manager or with a member of our team. You can have 15 minutes of time with us to just sort of go over your questions or give us your input, and we can sort of talk through anything you want. Those happen every other Wednesday from 3 to 7. In order to sign up, you can just go to bit.ly/Cummins-15 and then just pick a time and we'll be there. You can also reach out to Jeff. He is always eager to receive messages and look into what more we can do for the project. And we meet with him. And if you also send it to me, my name is Daniela.Sanchez@boston.gov. We will get back to you and also look into it. And I wanted to provide you with a little bit of update about what else the city is doing in Mattapan and sort of some resources available. On Friday, August 27th, there's going to be Mayor Janie's Mattapan Coffee Hour. So this is an opportunity to speak directly to the mayor, but also staff from other city departments, not only us, but also maybe ISD will be there. If you didn't make it to the meeting today, maybe, who knows? Anybody could be there. And it will be in an open space. So there'll be a park to enjoy. There will also be coffee, maybe some donuts. I see Magazine is going to be there. So you can feel free to drop by between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m. at Almond Park, I forgot to say. At the same park, every Tuesday, if you didn't know, there's also a family Zumba with Carmen. from 6 to 7. This is a program hosted by the Boston Parks and Recreations Department and Boston Public Health Commission and Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's also virtual classes and classes in other places around the city, which are free and led by certified instructors. So it's a great opportunity to sort of get out and get moving. In our previous discussion, we talked about like how hot it feels in some areas of the city. And so wanted to let you know that there's ways to stay cool. It's not the best ways, but it's some ways. We have, there's pools and tots that stay open through the summer and that help you keep cool in the heat. There's one at Hunt Playground and one at Ernest Cherry Junior Playground. And there's also a pool at the Mildred BCYF. And in addition to the pool and spray tots, there's also at the Mildred, there's also art classes and aquatics and computer literacy and cooking and a lot more resources available. I also wanted to briefly provide an update on the playground construction. The Walker Playground has begun in June, and the work is still is progressing through demolition and utility work. And if you have any questions about the project, which is going to be greatly improving the playground, you can contact Lauren Bryant. Her phone number is 617-961-3019. Lauren.bryant@boston.gov is where you can send her an email. There's also the Boston Public Libraries are hosting some Wi-Fi zones, pop-ups. So in order, you don't have to go into the library, you can be outside, and they provide shade and lighting and sitting and really strong Wi-Fi. I've heard is better than the one here at City Hall. So the one in Mattapan is at the Mattapan Library at 1350 Blue Hill Ave. In addition to having this 24-hour-a-day Wi-Fi zone, they're also offering on Tuesdays and Thursdays breakfast and lunches at no cost to use under 18 and under, I'm sorry. And then on Tuesdays between 9 and noon, there's also office hours for rent and relief funds. You can go and apply. I just wanted to also briefly mention that there are some nearby vaccination sites at the Gallivan Community Center. There's going to be an opportunity on Saturday, August 28th, and walk-ins are welcome. And also on Fridays through August at the Immigrant Family Services Institute at Bergen Health, which is on 1626 Blue Hill Avenue. And I'll drop the link on where there's also more sites for vaccination throughout the neighborhood. And I wanted to also let you know that there's, especially through the summer, there's a lot of community rides that are happening. There's a beginner-friendly ride on the Neponset River Greenway that meets every Monday night at 5:30 at the Mattapan Square T-stop, and they ride around the Neponset Greenway. And then there will be a women's-led beginner ride with the Women on Wheels and us on Sunday, August 29th at 11 a.m. So a little bit in the morning and in the weekend instead of Monday evenings. And we'll meet on the other side in Dorchester at the Neponset Trail parking lot at Hallett Street. And then one more chance to get on your bike in August. Blue Bikes with Blue Cross Blue Shield are offering free adventure passes on Mondays. So for Mindful Mondays, you have to get the code, and it's one different one for each Monday. And residents who have the app can insert that code and receive a free adventure pass, which allows 2-hour long rides for 24 hours. So it's great to take a nice long ride. And then if you don't know how to ride a bike. And we are also offering free learn to ride workshops for adult women. We had the ones in Mattapan this month or last month. And now we are at Franklin Park Playstead. The next one will be August 25th. And then for September, we'll be moving into the daylight because it tends to get dark pretty early or more early. And we'll be at the Boston Water and Sewer parking lots on September 11th and September 25th. And then for people who are ready to go out of the parking lot, we'll also be hosting a street skill where you can sign up and sort of, we'll start in the parking lot, do some drills, and then go out into the street and learn how to ride. And I think that is it. I noticed there were some questions and there was a question in the chat that I just wanted to see. Ayoka Drake, I see that you asked, are you involved in any advocacy regarding the Crane Woods project? Anyone know, have any information about that?
To my knowledge, the BPDA has not been involved in the Crane Woods project.
L. Jackson, you have a question, your hand's raised.
Hi, yes, I believe the other person attendee regarding the Crane Ledge Woods project, being that there's a proposal of 270 units with 415 surface parking spaces, that would affect the traffic, especially since there's a road diet on American Legion Highway and Cummins Highway. And so the impact of that, and is there a study going on regarding the possible increase in cars in the community, especially with the slow bus route number 14 and the overworked bus route number 32 around the area, because it definitely directly impacts Cummins Highway, and Cummins Highway impacts the project. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, this is Sam Devine. We are actively reviewing 990 American Legion Highway, and we're kind of getting into the meat of the traffic analysis for that project right now. The decreased capacity will be part of that analysis. And we are, the two projects are very much communicating with one another. And those are ongoing conversations at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Ayoka, would you like to unmute?
Hi. Yeah, the reason why I asked about the Crane Woods, so I'm new to this process of community meetings. I tried to get some updates where you got to sign up. I tried it last year and it didn't work out with a couple different people and there wasn't follow-up. So I know you talk about like heat resiliency and obviously, traffic and I know you're planning to it's a little bit weird that we're looking to take away like the most abundant trees we have in the area, and then we're gonna plant some along our little corridor here. But that's the reason that I asked, because obviously it's a big deal, and where I feel like it's the greatest opportunity to have the greatest impact. I just wanted to know, since you represent different entities, if you're advocating at all on our behalf. So that was my question with that. And then I noticed in the email, it talked about how, last year the speed has been reduced by, or I don't remember if it was the speed or the travel time, I apologize, but As far as measurements, isn't it a little challenging to measure? I mean, obviously, you have real data for, safety and, whether it's accidents or pedestrians, um, being injured and things like that. But there's been so much construction that I feel like it's really hard to gauge, real data, right? Because you can only drive so fast, and there's so many cars, you're only in one lane. And some of what you mentioned as far as what you recorded um, for people's questions, I didn't hear about the number of, I mean, between the area that you're speaking of from River Street to Wood Ave and Harvard Street, we have 2 funeral homes, directly on Cummins Highway. So there's impact there. And then you have these, I believe it's 6 cemeteries in the area. So if there's a funeral procession with one lane, I mean, it's literally impossible, to move. And so um, I was curious about those sorts of things, and where you're recording questions, how do we get the responses to those questions?
Okay,
Um,
go ahead, Jeff.
all right. So thank you for your questions, and I'm happy to provide any answers that I can. If you have any additional questions, ask that you please email them to me. I mean, so that I can get them written down for you.
Okay, thanks.
But in regards to I guess the viability of the data that we've collected, we have our design consultant on board to basically measure the travel times along the corridor, as well as the speeds along the corridor. We have video footage that determines the number of cars, that the volumes of the cars that are traveling on Cummins Highway. And in terms of the travel durations, the travel times, those I think we averaged about a 28-second increase in regards to the travel times along Cummins Highway, which we did expect. I mean, initially, in terms of our models, we did expect a minute increase. Whether it's due to COVID, whether it's due to the lower volumes in traffic, what we've seen is a 28-second average increase, and that's from Wood Avenue to Fairway, or to River Street, which is our data set. This was done during the peak times. So during traffic, while utility and construction has been out there, utility company has been out there. That's what our data has shown. I understand that there are instances where utility companies may block the lane for a time, for a minute. That's not really something that we could look at for our data set, but we understand that there has been some issues with the congestion on Cummins Highway, and we are working on ways to address that. The other issue with the traffic is with the pilot is that we understand that that it's difficult for cars to pass. That's mainly because there's a median in the roadway. With the design that we're looking at removing the median to allow cars to pass. Whether it be emergency vehicles, whether it be trash trucks. So that's something that we're hoping to address in the final design, working to address in the final design. In terms of the speeds, we provide detectors on the roadway that calculate the speeds of vehicles traveling on the corridor. So, the speeds did decrease over time. Of course they did, because it's one lane in one direction, in each direction. So cars aren't able to pick up those speeds that they have been because of the reduced volumes on Cummins Highway. All the data is available on our website. We ask that you please take a look at it. It does express it in more detail of what data we collected and how we're looking at it. I think that's your best bet. But as I mentioned, if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them, whether through email or even through one of our meetings. I'm sorry, was there another question that I was supposed to answer?
There was just one I wanted to take a or have a little bit of a feedback on was around the advocacy and, climate change, and obviously mature trees being in Crane Ledge, et cetera. So I think, one of the things that we have, as the BPD, as a Boston Planning and Development Agency, have the opportunity to do is obviously review these cases. And so unfortunately, when there's a private land and a private developer, they're allowed to propose specific things or projects or whatnot. And as the agency, we do review those cases for many considerations. So we have representation from the Environment Department, we have representation from the Boston Transportation Department, et cetera. And so it's one of those things where we advocate through the Article 80 process, so through the actual review of the proposals themselves. But we also, have to, unfortunately or fortunately, it just depends on the circumstance, I suppose. What's being proposed is allowed to be proposed and to be reviewed by both the community and the agency. And I think, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think also the Parks Department also is incredibly open to hearing a lot of this feedback as well, seeing as they do oversee a lot of the open space in our city. So I would reach out to Parks directly, because I believe that they are trying to they're trying to gain an understanding of what's going on, especially with the community. And I've spoken to them, but it would be great for them to continue to hear from residents, because that's the best way to mobilize a lot of our agencies. So if I can drop a contact into the chat, just so that those who are interested can reach out.
Hi, Matthew. I think, okay, sorry. Matthew, please feel free to unmute.
Thank you. And thank you guys for the presentation tonight. A couple quick notes that I wanted to add. This is a great format. I feel like you guys have zoned in on the Zoom setup here. That is a good one, where we can see who the other participants are. I wanted to call that out as something nicely done. Thank you, appreciate it. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'm on the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, and I wanted to say thank you to Jeff and to Muggsy and Jared for your ongoing coordination with the Neighborhood Council. I know that, this is just one in a long series, so we look forward to continuing to work together. Jeff, you mentioned early on about the potential for extending the project limits from in the northwest from Harvard/Wood out to American Legion. Just a quick shout out that's a great, we love to hear that. Hope that is something that you guys can run with. And then I just wanted to ask a quick open-ended question to anybody who wanted to respond. This meeting is all about how the land use on Cummins Highway might change or could impact the design. And, you guys had a ton of great information. I was just wondering if maybe you all wanted to give like your just quick one sentence. What's the number one takeaway we should have from this?
So I think from a Plan Mattapan perspective, and obviously the BPDA determines zoning, which then kind of determines how we can use land. It's kind of our responsibility to foresee what could happen along Cummins Highway or any of the corridors in Mattapan. As we had discussed quite some time ago, and what we'll be discussing in September will be, what does that look like on Cummins Highway? What is the overall height, density, massing? What are the uses? When we say uses, what are the land uses on Cummins Highway? Generally speaking, where we're at right now is that we see Cummins Highway to be pretty much what it is today in terms of the land uses. One thing that we're exploring in an effort to make sure that the Mattapan neighborhood is walkable and that it is convenient to get some of the goods and services that people need is to really hone in on those nodes that Muggsy talked about. and offer opportunities there where we would see opportunities for retail businesses, convenience stores, bodegas, restaurants, etc., and start to create these little hubs of interactivity where you don't need to go to Mattapan Square for necessarily everything. You can just walk down the street a few blocks, you can ride your bicycle, etc. So that certainly is going to have an effect on how people use Cummins highways and and the neighboring streets and use that part of the neighborhood. We're exploring the same thing on Blue Hill Avenue, Morton Street, River Street, etc. So there are some things that would change. When we talk about uses and how they align with our road systems, our transportation networks, it can have some varying impacts. Our hope is for us as we change land use or as the road network and transportation networks change, that the land uses update to match them. So really what we want you to take away here is that we are coordinating to make sure that the proposals that we have through Plan Mattapan are going to be sustained by other projects that are ongoing and vice versa.
I will say that probably for Cummins, one of the priorities that's moving us is safety and access. I think as Jeff has talked about, one of the many things we've heard has been the unsafe speeds on Cummins and also the need for better infrastructure for all users. And so, and when we are out there, the one thing people talk to us about is how unsafe it feels to walk and how hard it is to cross the street. And so we want to make sure that we are providing those opportunities for people now that are living there, but also in the future for generations to come to feel like the street is a good street for them to live and to work and to ride and to get to where they're going.
Yeah, I think I would just kind of reiterate and emphasize what Daniel was saying in regards to the Cummins Highway project. As I mentioned, the main goal of this project is to improve safety along the corridor for all modes of traffic. I mean, it needs to be safer for pedestrians, for cyclists, for drivers. I mean, we have a crash map available on the Cummins Highway website. I mean, that shows a number of crashes that resulted in injury along the corridor. I mean, that's not even to mention the crashes that, I mean, just only resulted in property damage. So, I mean, it's something that we're looking at. We want to help and we want to improve, as well as address a number of the other concerns when it comes to heat resiliency, when it comes to air quality. We're looking at, I mean, the visibility issues that are currently occur on Cummins Highway with the lights. We're looking at making a number of improvements along Cummins Highway, not just reducing the number of travel lanes. But I do want to emphasize that, I mean, we are looking at the traffic. We do want the roadway, and we are working for the roadway to function efficiently. We have a traffic management team who lets us know and who definitely pushes back on causing any congestion issues throughout the network. So they'll be involved in this project. They'll be involved in the review of this project. But ultimately, as I mentioned, I mean, it's about safety and making the necessary and much needed improvements along the corridor.
Thank you, Jeff. Barbara, you can unmute. Barbara, are you there?
Oh. Yes, I am. All right, sorry.
No, it's fine. You're fine.
So my comment was, I know this is on Cummins Highway, but it seems as though you're neglecting the connection between Mattapan and Hyde Park. And so, you know, we're like almost one general area. When it comes to the Hyde Park and Wood Ave to Cummins Highway, you know, that's a major thoroughfare for us, you know, between River Street and Cummins Highway along Wood Ave. And so the conversation, I know, has been focused on Cummins Highway, but don't forget the Hyde Park, and it's not just Mattapan. It's that end of Hyde Park, and you need to include us in your thinking, and as you're looking at routes and so forth. Those neighbors use Wood Ave leading to Cummins Highway every day. And people come from Hyde Park to Wood Ave and go across, to Harvard Street. So just don't forget that link. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. This is really good for BPDA to take note, but also for us, we're looking at also volume and traffic counts on some side streets, so we can take a look at sort of some of the suggestions you've given on some of the routes that people take and connect to Cummins to see how those are impacted. So thank you for your comments. And we do have a note. I just want to also note, apart from being recorded, we have a note taker so we can review everything that's being said after. Helena? And please do correct me if I say your name incorrectly. I do like to pronounce names the way that you prefer them. Helena, you can unmute.
Okay, there it is. Thank you very much. It was like the host has to unmute you.
Oh no, okay, sorry.
No problem. I just have 4 quick points. One, piggybacking off of what Barbara said, and Jeffrey, I think the last kind of community-wide meeting that we had with you, and I believe Zachary, please forgive me if I pronounce his name incorrectly. And we did speak about the overflow that's taking place on these side streets that we've been concerned about for years. And as Barbara will mention, we have schools tucked away in our residential neighborhoods. And so we've been having this concern for years, and we're finally starting to get some implementation on slowing down those streets. But also what we're realizing is, our side streets are becoming cut-throughs to get out of the Cummins Highway traffic. And I know Zach had mentioned that we could put in for a slow streets program, but again, it's taken us this long to even kind of get to a point of dealing with what we previously had before this redesign even became a conversation. So that's one point that I wanted to kind of emphasize what Barbara was making. Also in regards to a lot that I've heard about these main corridors is nothing really about looking at the MBTA bus stops and how those will be affected or redesigned to make sure they're more effective and efficient for those who may need to use them. If we're going to encourage folks to walk, bike, whatever, we need to make sure these bus stops are convenient, well lit, et cetera, as well as what I've received from Forest Hills is that they do not have enough parking space to implement more buses to leave out of Forest Hills. So if we're already talking about slowing this down and they can only get so many buses out of Forest Hill Station as it is, I think there needs to be a really deeper conversation about the MBTA, about making sure if we're going to encourage this, that people don't want to be late for work. They don't want to be late dropping off their kids to school. They don't want their kids being late to school, which is something that's a problem in our area with kids getting to school out of 5 schools in our area right now, which is the area that Barbara was speaking about, all tucked into that Wood Avenue area. So if this is going to create a greater problem for those kids to get to school, it really needs to bring MBTA into this conversation. Another piece that never often gets spoken about is after these projects are completed is about a survey. whether it's a 6-month survey or a year survey, to check back in with the community and say, how's it going? Where do you see the defects and the problem? I know often these projects, like, Jeffrey mentioned, the Cummins Highway redesign is $12 million. There need to be some set aside funding just in case we need to go back, or, departments need to have the rediscussion and said, we thought this would work, but it doesn't work specifically for this area. And I say that because we had this same redesign in my area at one particular intersection, and we're now working with BTD, BPS, district counselor, our neighborhood association to redesign that area. And it's working really well. But these are also suggestions that we put in place before this redesign, saying that we understand it worked over in Fairmont, but it's not working here. It went into place, and now we're back to kind of spending unnecessary money to redesign this intersection. So if there was some type of survey, this has to be implemented as part of the plan. A 6-month survey, a yearly survey, so neighbors can check back in and everybody can check back and say, this is what we see is working well and not working well. And the final piece that I had was the ongoing maintenance. So I heard this conversation about, putting trees to help with the heat island effect along the Cummins Highway corridor. We just had 27 trees that we wanted put in to our neighborhood to replace dead trees. And the residents are the only ones watering those trees. And for most who may or may not know, the first 3 years of a newly planted tree's life is the most important. So if they're not getting water, then they're dead, right? In the first 3 years. So we're out here doing the heavy lifting, filling gator bags and watering trees. So when we talk about these implementations, we want to look at where will maintenance need to be and making sure that it's budget, a line item budget to make that sure that maintenance carries forward, whether it's watering trees and making sure the trees survive for 3 years, or whether it's some other factors in the matter. Those are my 4 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Those are some great points. Jeff, do you?
Yes, I can kind of speak to some of them for the most part. Regarding the maintenance of the trees and the green infrastructure, yes, we agree with you 100%. We are working with parks to have them maintain all the trees that are proposed to be on Cummins Highway. We're not planning on removing any of the existing trees along the corridor. The plan is to maintain those, plant more trees, and also we're working with our division to bring on board a consultant to also maintain any green infrastructure that we're proposing on Cummins Highway. So that's something that the city is looking at and we're working on, because I mean, as we've all kind of been saying, this is important to address a lot of the heat island effects that we're seeing throughout the city. And more greenery will definitely help alleviate some of those issues. So that maintenance is something that we're looking at as part of this project to be resolved and not have to be taken on by, whether it be local businesses or residents. Like we're working to take on that as part of this project as well. In regards to the traffic and the side streets, we're actually planning on taking a look at the side streets this coming fall. We have a number of data collection and ATRs that we're looking at collecting on, I think we have 10 streets off of Cummins Highway in addition to Cummins Highway. So we are looking at that. We are also looking at BPS and their operations in regards to their school bus operations with school going back. Hopefully we can get some good information with school returning. Haven't really, we're working on that. We don't know. We don't know for sure if we're going to be getting 100% school bus operations in September. We do have some data from May and April, but I think a number of parents have elected to during that time to have their kids work from home as well, to school from home as well. So these are things that we're looking at, we're monitoring them, we're working with BPS as well as the MBTA. We're working with them to see whatever needs that they want us to implement as part of this project. Some of the things that we've heard is about bus shelters. Some of the things that we've kind of got pushed heard some pushback on was like in-lane bus stops, which we are not proposing as part of this project. But yeah, we are working with MBTA, we are working out with BPS to make sure that their issues are addressed. And ultimately, as I mentioned, like we're working to maintain efficient traffic flow along the corridor with a one-lane setup in each direction. I mean, that's something that is a must in order for this project to be successful. So that's one of the main issues that we're looking at, as well as improving safety. I want to say I missed a couple of other points. Please remind me.
Well,
Danielle.
the other one was about the survey for after the project.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I agree wholeheartedly, 100%. This is something that we've also talked about in our division about, having, metrics that we can kind of calculate and measure after a project is completed. So we're 100% on board with providing surveys to the community after, as well as looking at whether there are any issues that come up post reconstruction. But our plan and our hope and our intent, as I mentioned, is to provide and create and put out the best design product. That would address the number of issues that the community has raised. Like we're not working to have to come back. So this is one of the main reasons why we instituted a pilot to see what the main issues were. Because you can model, you can take the data, you can take the traffic volumes and model them until it's actually out there, until you actually see it, you may miss something. So that's one of the main reasons that we wanted to provide the pilot as well. And there were a number of issues that we've seen and we've saw. So those are things we'll be working on during the design. Should anything come up, as I mentioned, like this is an ongoing process. We're looking at the side streets. If something comes up from the side streets, we'll also take a look at that as well.
Thank you, Jeff. I also just wanted to mention that when we look at the traffic and the speed in the side streets, it's not just to like monitor it. We'll be looking at sort of what can be done if there's significant speeding happening. One of the things that we're looking at for the purpose design is raised crosswalks at the entrances and exits of the streets that abut Cummins, so like the streets that intersect them, so that traffic slows down as they enter into the side streets. And also, we can look at other possible designs to slow speeds and make side streets more comfortable along near Cummins. I also want to just call out that it's 7:54. So also you can write down your question on the chat and we can get back to you. But in the meantime, I will call on Luis. Let me ask you to unmute.
Good evening, everybody. I live in Hyde Park. I'm like Barbara, and I am one of the neighbors that live off the street of a Cummins Highway. And I've been on this street, on Hebron Street, for about 16 years. And there's kids now, we're having younger families moving in the street. And now the fear is, I have some grandkids that come by and visit us, and they're scared to get on the street with their bikes because cars flying by. You can put all the slow signs all you want, they will fly by. And our fear is that one of these kids on the street is going to get hit. We got Seminole, Kennebunk, all around us that they cut through off of Wood Ave and go down through Mariposa Street onto Cummins. So most of those high streets are the cutoff streets instead of going all the way to the lights. And I've been home for about a month because of vacation. And I'm here doing work at home, and I see it every day. And every day gets worse. So as this construction is going on, these people don't start using all these little side streets off our Wood Ave to get onto Cummins Highway. And, all we need is one of our own kids or someone else could get hit. And I know when I come home from work, some streets have the bumps on them, to slow them down. And I think to me, some of these streets should be put some of these things on. Most of these streets will slow them down. And my other points are also some of these schools going to stop pretty soon. You're going to have the MBTA, and we got this one lane. And my whole fear is that every time that you got all these school buses coming out pretty soon in September, and you got the MBTA buses. And sometimes the MBTA buses don't even pull into the to their stops completely. They're just staying in the lane. So that makes even traffic even worse. You know, so if there's a fire emergency, they can't get by. Even what we're doing now, even though this project is gonna take a while, but right now, it's gonna be dangerous. So if someone's home's on fire or emergency somewhere, you know, and it's a shame to see anything happen. And, you know, if this project's gonna come through, are they gonna be like police boxes at the stops? Someone can hit a police box or police can respond in case of emergency. Like you say, you'll have plenty of lighting, but is there gonna be something there besides pick up your phone 911? Because if your phone, you get robbed, you ain't gonna have a phone to call 911. My whole thing is about this project right now, it's a fear, you know, in the future coming, you know. You get these kids around here with these scooters, four-wheeling, going up and down Cummins Highway, and the police don't do anything. They probably fear of getting hurt instead of other people getting hurt. And during the summer, you see it all the time, even during the fall. If there's no snow, they're gonna be out there, you know, and it's gonna get worse as these kids get out there. You know, to me, it's more dangerous than anything else. And it's a fear how this traffic flow is gonna be more traffic than anything else. The MBTA is already slow what it is, especially the 30 bus. If I take it home from work, I'm waiting up Forest Hill almost 45 minutes because they don't go by their schedule. It's supposed to be every 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's never there. So people trying to get to work, the MBTAs it's pathetic half the time. You know, they increase fares and the service is getting worse every year. You know, they get a lot of money from the government, from the state, and the bus route 14, 30, 32, it's just getting worse every year as all these projects going around us. You know, we have to walk to these places just to get to work. And I don't know what's the city gonna do about it. Between you got illegal parking around our streets, you know, trying to get residential parking. That's another thing that's gonna pretty soon gonna happen around in the High Park area. They're gonna start using a residential street to park to grab the bus or do something. Well, thank you. It's a great meeting. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Luis, for your comment. I just wanted to briefly mention again that when we look at the side streets, we are looking to see where the speeding is happening. So this feedback of telling me where the street is, if you think there's speeding happening, would be great feedback to make sure that we incorporate them into the streets that we're looking at for the project. Because this project as it's developing, it's not just like Cummins, but also a comprehensive more look at how the neighborhood is also affected. And how we can work together to slow speeds and make it safer for everyone. Okay. Sorry, I unmuted myself, which I meant to unmute L. Jackson.
Thank you, Daniela. So I'm just going to restate something that was communicated, I know, to Jeff at a community initiated forum within the last couple of months, but many people in our neighborhood, the neighborhood where I live, I'm one of the co-chairs of an abutting neighborhood to Cummins Highway, excuse me, off of Greenfield Road. And many people are against this, redesign of going down to one lane per direction. But one of the things that hasn't been brought up, at least in the forums that I've been in, and it's just one more layer just to consider as far as the traffic, since you all have been considering the congestion and so forth and possible remedies, is since federal and other levels of emergency management have been planning for various types of disasters and so forth and so on. What have you all given thought as far as emergency routes out, being that the roads around these communities, our communities where we live, are going from 2 lanes to 1 and having to escape in the event of natural disasters or all kinds of issues, right? Not just natural, as some of the federal emergency leaders are expecting to start coming or in the future. Like, have you given thought to that? Because I know this may seem really remote, but apparently it's not that remote based upon some of our federal leaders. So I did want to put that out there too, to ask about your consideration. And again, I know that may seem way out there, but I do want to hear about that too, as far as the emergency planning for residents to escape. Thank you.
I mean, I imagine that this would be more of a transportation issue. But in regards to Cummins Highway, Cummins Highway is listed as an emergency route. Mainly if it's, if there is a snow emergency, cars aren't allowed to park on Cummins Highway. I think the same effect will be true in terms of say there's a catastrophe, and residents need to kind of get out or need to move. The routes that are labeled or categorized emergency routes or roads, there'll just essentially be no parking, and cars will be able to kind of flow a little bit more freely through the roadway. Cummins Highway, where we are proposing to reduce the number of travel lanes, but we are maintaining the road to be passable in a sense. We want to maintain a minimum roadway width to address a lot of those concerns. With Cummins Highway, we're looking at, essentially providing with 2 8-foot parking lanes, as well as 2 11-foot travel lanes. I think we're looking at 36 feet, 38 feet along Cummins Highway. So that's just simply the roadway. So there is space on Cummins Highway in terms of the project to provide cars to pass. But yeah, that's something that the city does look at in terms of emergency routes. God forbid any of that happens, and we don't have to deal with that. But that's something that we do look at. Yes.
Thank you, Jeff and Lakita, for those questions. Rachel, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you. I did put the question in the chat, but just to reiterate, now that this pilot program has been implemented, I've noticed on occasion there has been congestion for delivery trucks, particularly at Crest Liquors, when a delivery truck, a very long delivery truck, tried to make a left turn onto Cummins and was unable to because of the posts and the parking. And having to maneuver that left turn held up traffic for a good 10 minutes. Then there was another incident where there were delivery trucks down at the corner of River and Cummins on the side of this supermarket. It held up traffic there. Part of the problem, the way those trucks are situated, if someone is turning onto Cummins from Blue Hill Avenue, they can't see those trucks. And then they get stuck because those trucks are just sitting there. There was an occasion where a delivery truck coming out of that alleyway, instead of taking a right to come up Cummins, it turned left going the wrong way. That's a disaster in the waiting, especially because that's a blind spot. you're talking about increasing businesses and other, mixed use area. If you're increasing businesses, especially businesses that are going to require deliveries, and now you have just one lane along with parking, along with the bike lane, and you're trying to reduce traffic congestion, you're going to fail, because that right there is going to increase traffic congestion. And for the record, you may have indicated that the increased travel is only 28 seconds. I will tell you, there are many occasions when I drive down Cummins Highway, my travel time just from Wood Ave to the light at River is a good 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for your comments. In regards to the deliveries, I'm not entirely sure which section. You mentioned a left turn onto Cummins Highway in front of Crest Liquors. I'm not entirely sure, but we are looking at deliveries along that section. I mean, we have spoken to the previous owner of Crest Liquors, and we will be speaking to the new owners in regards to whether there need to be any regulations or accommodations to provide deliveries in that section. In regards to the flex posts, as well as the parking, flex posts, we're proposing to remove those as part of the final design. Parking will be will be up against the curb, and in regards to the traffic, we're looking at removing the median and also providing left turn lanes for cars to be able to have that space and access. So I mean, there's a number of issues that we're looking at to address, and part of the final design that is not we're not able to implement or resolve during the pilot. Which, and I completely understand. You mean you're saying that you've had issues. Or you've seen those issues where they've caused backups along the corridor. We've seen them too. We've heard them. We've heard it from the residents. Those are the things that we want to hear, where we want to, but we're looking to address them in the final design. And in regards to the traffic, as I mentioned, the section that you're talking about on Cummins Highway by River Street, we're not proposing to make much changes in that area. We are still going to be providing 2 travel lanes into Mattapan Square because the traffic needs it. There's a number, that area queues up. I know you've seen it after work, where there's a backup from Mattapan Square. We're looking at maintaining 2 lanes, similar to what you're seeing with the pilot into Mattapan Square. But I mean, in terms of addressing the congestion that you've seen, I mean, I know it may have felt at 20 minutes. I travel down Cummins Highway every single day. I mean, I understand that. I mean, getting stuck in traffic is not pleasant. We're looking at ways to mitigate that. As I mentioned, it was removing the median, improving the traffic signals to help traffic to flow efficiently, as well as providing left turn lanes. I mean, so the cars aren't being backed up, waiting for a vehicle to turn. So these are all things that we're looking at. I mean, we love to hear it because we know these are concerns, and we know if we miss something, the residents who live there and who are out there, they're definitely going to see it and they're going to let us know. So thank you for that comment, and that's something that we're definitely looking to address.
Thank you, Jeff. One last question from Lee Stoma. We're following also the chat, so if you do have any questions and you want to drop them there, we'll make sure to get them answered. And back to you via email. But we'll take one last question from Lee Stoma, and then we'll make sure to give everyone the rest of their evening back so they can have dinner and enjoy. So go ahead, Lee.
Thank you very much. First, I wanted to thank you all for hosting the meeting and for the opportunity to speak. If you don't mind that I, as a neighbor from a few blocks south of the river in Milton, speak about this. I wanted to make sure the neighborhood residents had a chance to speak. But anyway, I'm a member of the Neponset Greenway Council and collaborate with neighbors in Mattapan for events, our Neponset and Mattapan on Wheels events in both of our communities. I just wanted to support the proposed safety improvements and point out that it aligns with Milton's goals of reducing speeding and cut-through traffic coming in from Route 128 across both Milton and Mattapan. The town has done a similar project on Brook Road and is looking at things on Randall Route. 28 as well. So also the city staff had mentioned the goal of creating a corridor to the Blue Hills Reservation. Milton, MassDOT, and DCR are also working on this, and Milton and Mattapan neighbors are also working together to get better transit access between Mattapan Square and the Blue Hills Reservation. But back to Cummins Highway, the proposed make it safer for neighbors, especially seniors and those with mobility issues. One time when the road was 4 lanes, I held my breath as I watched a man in a wheelchair trying to get across the road. While cars in the second lane zoomed by, even when the cars in the first lane had stopped for him. Anyway, I really look forward to seeing these safety improvements, and I hope that they do come through. So thank you again for your efforts on this, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate your comments. Daniela, you muted.
Thank you. Of course, to end the night, I'm muted. I just wanted to thank everyone once again for coming and for your questions and your comments. And we'll be taking a look at some of the suggestions that you've provided for us to look at side streets and for the final design, especially in terms of deliveries. It seems to be a lot of discussion on those. So thank you for all of your comments, and to the folks at BPDA, Muggsy and Jared and Sam, for joining us today and giving everyone a sort of preview of the work that you're doing, a brief overview, and also going over how we collaborate on these projects and in the future. So again, this will be recorded and it will be available online. We will send you an email when it is up. And the presentation will also be translated to Spanish and Haitian Creole for those to be shared. With that, have a good evening. Enjoy dinner. And we'll see you at the next one, September 21st. We'll be talking about lighting.